The air around the CEO felt heavier now, as though the walls of the restaurant had drawn closer with every tick of the clock. His gaze fixed on the two little girls who sat before him, their legs dangling off the edge of the chair, their bright eyes, reflecting the dim golden light that flickered from the candles placed neatly across the table. He could not understand who they were, or why they seemed to know him, yet there was something in their faces, something hauntingly familiar, like a faint echo from a memory he had buried deep inside a lifetime ago. The waiter glanced over, uncertain whether to approach or stay away. The unease was visible on every face nearby. The chatter of other guests softened, as if the entire room could sense that something was not quite right. The CEO leaned slightly forward, his voice calm but uncertain, asking them who they were and where their parents might be. But the girls simply looked at each other, exchanging glances that seemed far too knowing for their age. One of them finally spoke, her words soft like a whisper carried by the wind. She said that their mother had told them to find him, to wait for him here until he arrived. A chill moved through him like cold water down his spine, for no one outside his closest circle even knew of this date. The meeting had been arranged in secrecy through a friend of a friend, and yet these children spoke as if they had known every detail. Their presence stirred questions he was not ready to face, and when he asked the name of their mother, the second girl smiled sadly before replying that she could not tell him, not yet. Not until the right time came. He leaned back in his chair, trying to gather his composure, though his mind raced through names and faces from his past, every decision, every meeting, every stranger he might have crossed paths with, who could have sent them, and why. The sound of rain outside grew stronger, the rhythmic tapping on the window blending with the faint hum of tension that filled the air. He noticed how the two girls were not wet from the rain, despite having come from outside, their hair perfectly dry, their clothes spotless, as though they had stepped out of nowhere and appeared just in front of him. The older of the two placed a small folded piece of paper on the table, her hands trembling as she did so, and for a long moment he stared at it, unable to decide whether to open it or not. The edges were slightly torn, as if the note had been carried for a long time. He finally reached for it. Slowly, his heartbeat echoing in his chest as though the world had fallen silent around him. Inside was a single photograph, old and faded, showing a woman whose face he recognized instantly, though it had been years since he had last seen her. Memories surged back in waves, her laughter, the way she used to tilt her head when she smiled, the unfinished conversations that had ended with her sudden disappearance. He had searched for her once, perhaps longer, than he admitted to himself, but had given up believing she had moved on with her life. Yet seeing her picture now in the hands of these mysterious children shattered every piece of calm he had built over the years. He looked back at them, his voice almost breaking as he asked where she was, but before he could finish his question, the younger girl shook her head, her expression turning serious in a way that no child should ever look. She said that their mother could not come, not yet, because it was not safe, that there were people watching him right now, and that he needed to leave the restaurant before the clock struck 9. He wanted to laugh at the absurdity of it all, but something about her words, the tremor in her voice and the way her eyes darted toward the window, made him freeze in his seat. His instincts told him that this was no childish imagination. Something was truly wrong. He glanced at the door, half expecting to see someone waiting outside, but the street beyond was empty, bathed only in the faint reflection of streetlights on the wet pavement. He looked down again, but the chair across from him was empty. The girls were gone as silently as they had appeared. His pulse quickened as he turned his head, scanning the restaurant, but they were nowhere to be seen. The photograph still lay on the table, its edges damp from the condensation of his untouched glass. He picked it up once more, feeling the weight of the paper, as though it carried more than just an image. And in that moment he noticed something he had missed before. In the corner of the photo, faintly scribbled in pencil, were the words, "Look behind you." His breath caught as he slowly turned his head, the reflection in the window showing a figure standing just behind his chair, still and waiting. The figure behind him did not move at first. It stood still like a shadow cast by something unseen. The CEO could feel the presence before he even turned his head, his reflection in the glass trembling slightly from the shaking of his own hands. He slowly rose from his chair, every muscle in his body tense, every instinct screaming for him to leave. Yet something inside told him he needed to face whoever or whatever was behind him. He turned and saw a woman standing a few feet away. Her hair dark, her expression unreadable, and her eyes filled with the same storm that had haunted his dreams for years. For a moment, time seemed to stop. His breath caught in his chest because it was her, the woman. From the photograph, the one who had disappeared without a word, leaving him to chase shadows in the middle of sleepless nights. She looked older now, worn by time and burden. Yet the way she held herself was the same, confident and quiet, as if the world around her could never quite reach her. The room around them seemed to fade as he tried to speak, but his voice failed him. She raised her hand, stopping him before a single word could form, and in that instant, he knew that this meeting was not one of reunion but of warning. She told him in a voice soft yet trembling that he should never have come, that the date he thought was arranged by a friend was never meant to happen, that someone had used his name, his habits, his private schedule, to draw him out of his guarded world. The two little girls, she said, were hers, and yes, they were also his, though he had never known of their existence. She had kept them hidden for their own safety, for reasons that she could not explain. Not yet, not here, not now. The CEO stood motionless, trying to absorb the flood of words, the weight of secrets that crashed against the walls of his mind. He wanted to ask who was after them and why. What danger could possibly link his forgotten love and two innocent children to his corporate empire? She only shook her head and told him that there was no time to talk, that they were being watched, that the people he once trusted had already marked him as a threat because he had seen something something buried in his company's deepest files, something he had chosen to ignore, thinking it was nothing more than corporate politics. But it was much more than that. It was evidence that could ruin men powerful enough to erase anyone who got in their way. He remembered the project then, the one that had vanished quietly after a sudden internal audit, the one tied to a mysterious offshore partner. He had signed the documents himself, not realizing what they meant. The memories began to align, like puzzle pieces forming a picture too dark to comprehend. The woman stepped closer, her eyes pleading with him to leave immediately, to go somewhere safe, and to trust no one, not even those who worked closest to him. She handed him a small flash drive wrapped in a torn piece of paper, and told him that everything he needed to understand the truth was inside. Before he could respond, a loud crash echoed from the far end of the restaurant, the glass door swinging open violently as two men in black coats entered, their eyes scanning the room. One of them lifted a phone to his ear, murmuring something under his breath before nodding toward their table. The woman grabbed his hand and whispered that it was too late, they had found them. She pulled him toward the kitchen exit. But before they could move, the older of the two men blocked their path, his expression cold, his movements deliberate as though rehearsed. The CEO felt his heartbeat thunder in his ears as he positioned himself, slightly in front of her, though he knew he had no plan, no idea what to do. The man in black smiled faintly and said that they had been looking for him for a long time, that he had something which did not belong to him, something that could not be allowed to exist any longer. The woman held the flash drive tighter. Her eyes darting toward the back door, she mouthed a single word, "Run," and before he could protest, she pushed him away hard enough to send him stumbling toward the kitchen corridor. Turned back just in time to see the man grabbing her arm and demanding the drive. She resisted, her voice rising just enough for him to hear her final words. She told him to find the truth, to protect the girls, and to never stop running, no matter what happens. He wanted to go back to help her. But the younger man drew something metallic from his coat, and the sound that followed was sharp, like thunder splitting the air. He froze, unable to move as the woman fell, the flash drive slipping from her grasp and skidding across the floor toward him. He picked it up without thinking and ran through the kitchen, his lungs burning as shouts erupted behind him. The narrow hallways twisted into darkness, and he burst out into the rain-drenched streets, the city lights blurring in his vision. He kept running, unsure of where to go or who to trust, the rain mixed with sweat and fear on his skin as he ducked into an alley, his mind spinning with questions and memories and the weight of the small device. In his hand, he knew it contained the answers, but he also knew that once he opened it, there would be no going back. Hours later, he found himself standing in front of a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city, his expensive